Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Erin Flanagan, and I'm here in conversation today with Andromeda Ramano-Lax. Honored to be here. I am the author of two collections of short stories and three novels, including Deer Season, which was the 2022 Edgar winner for Best First Novel. And Andromeda, our star of the day, is the author of five historical novels, including The Spanish Bow, which was translated into 11 languages. Her latest book, The Deepest Lake, is her first suspense novel and was a Crime Reads Best Psychological Thriller of May 2024 and The Observer's Top 10 Best Travel Thrillers. And it is now in paperback and this month's Barnes & Noble Mystery Thriller Monthly Pick. So, Andromeda, can you tell us about the book?
Yes, and thank you so much for doing this, Erin. Thank you, Barnes& and Noble, and everyone who's shown up. This is so exciting. I love the intro. So The Deepest Lake is the story of Rose, a mother who wants to discover the truth about the apparent drowning of her daughter Jules in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, where Jules was working for her idol, controversial memoirist named Eva Marshall. So it's a mother trying to find out what happened to her daughter.
Oh, gotta love that. What drew you to the story? Where'd it come from?
So, I think readers want to believe that like we have these singular moments. Like I was lying in a bathtub on May 2nd, and it all came to me. In fact, often what happens is that there's these different points of inspiration. So for over 20 years, I have attended and sometimes taught writing workshops. And these are very intense experiences that bring all kinds of people together for some very emotional experiences. And I had attended quite a few across the genres, fiction, memoir, screenwriting, and had a lot of experiences, including plenty of negative experiences. And then in 2019, I attended one more workshop on Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And it was probably the strangest and most intense I had ever experienced. So for all those times, I had always had sort of questions in my mind, including ethical questions, but I did not
Mhm.
associate that with the idea of writing a novel at all. But so we have all these things kind of simmering, but it took me a while to figure out that this could be told in the form of fiction.
Okay, so you weren't interested in nonfiction for this one?
Well, I did actually at one point think about writing an essay about some of the
Mhm.
things I had witnessed. And there were a lot of reasons why I didn't decide to write the essay, including the fact that very few people would probably read it. And also, I would have to think about, do I actually call out people by name? Because again, what I had seen was not in one place, it
Mhm.
was in many places. And so the former journalist in me felt like, well, there's sort of a journalistic way to do this, there's an essayistic way to do this. And then on top of that, a lot of the stories I had heard at workshops were these very private stories belonging to women writers. And I couldn't share those stories. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't have all the specifics. So it was something that couldn't really be handled well in nonfiction, I thought.
Well, I love that pivot to fiction then. I think that makes so much sense. And I love too the idea of ethical considerations, like surrounding workshops, as they're happening, but also after they're happening, and how that kind of all works together. And yet there's still like some of those in fiction as well. But can you tell us some of the good experiences with workshops? There's
Yes,
got to be
exactly.
some, right?
Because there's good and bad.
Yeah.
So among the good things that happen in a writing workshop is that people get to sort of, I think of it as coming out of the closet for sometimes the first time, get to come forward and say, I'm a writer and
Hmm.
I'm going to share my story. And I used to be a very shy person. I remember going to my first writing class where I actually had to read aloud and share. And that transformed my identity because I definitely believe that you're not a writer like when you publish a book. You're a writer when you are doing the act of writing, and then you reach this next step when you share that piece of writing, and you can claim that name for yourself, writer. So that's very important. And you identify other people who share your values. You're kind of seeing, I'm here with a tribe of people who care about this, and we can be brave. That's all wonderful and very important.
Hmm.
And then the negative side is that, particularly in the area of memoir, far more, I would say, than fiction or screenwriting, people are actually bringing some of the hardest things that have ever happened to them to the page and then to a group of people who are then critiquing it. And not
Yeah.
only critiquing how it's written, but often, and this is a problem, critiquing the person themselves. And so it requires
Yeah.
a very careful type of facilitation and an awareness that instructors are not psychologists, but there are going to be repercussions after people have that experience, you know. And so understanding sort of how vulnerable people can be is important, and there are boundaries that should not be crossed, I would say.
Yeah. No, that's hard. And there's no manual, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I've also been in workshops so long, both on both sides of the table, and you just hope you're not saying something that's going to be taken out of context or something. And it's really like it's a really raw emotional experience. So what's so interesting then, because it is so like loaded and emotional, then the idea of adding that to a thriller, like how did you move from like the idea of writing about a workshop to the idea of like, oh, suspense?
Yeah, so I was kind of a slow learner on this one, Erin.
I'm a
So
slow learner on most things.
so I had started trying to write suspense just a little bit later, and I was meeting my editor at a conference in Michigan. And so we were sitting down to lunch, and she asked me what I was working on, and I just sort of started tiptoeing into suspense, having a lot of fun with it. And I described the book I was writing at the time. And this book is not, it has never been published. So but I was explaining how it takes place in Canada and Italy over this length of time, and it was all kind of diffuse. And she said, okay, yeah, maybe I'm interested, or, you know, sounds good, but let me read it when it's done. And I said, okay, I've got to admit, I know what I'm doing wrong. Um, a really good suspense novel would not sprawl this way. It would take place in one place. The
Mm-hmm.
place would be very important, and there would be a shorter timeline, and there would be a very urgent question. You know, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and right on the spot as she's eating her lunch, I pitched the storyline that would become The Deepest Lake, because I still had that setting in my mind from the trip I had done fairly, you know, in the last year. And so I said,
Mm-hmm.
a mother arrives on the shore of Lake Atitlan, this beautiful but also kind of menacing lake backed by volcanoes. And she is there because she believes that her daughter drowned in that lake 3 months ago, but she is not. She is not getting the answers that she wants. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. So my editor is in the chat and says, I will never forget this lunch.
I imagine her with like lettuce hanging out her mouth, like, oh my God, this sounds so good.
I hope Juliet remembers it the same way. She may not, because this gets at what happens with memoirs and storytelling. We all remember it slightly differently, but that's the way I remember it.
Oh, that's funny. I'm sure she was like, oh, absolutely. That was so charming. I loved that. But it is a really like big pivot, I think, going to suspense.
Yes.
And you said you'd been working on something else and you could identify what wasn't necessarily working. So you were obviously studying the genre, understanding the genre,
Yes.
but not quite putting it together. Like how did it finally click? Was it when you pitched it and said, "Oh, I can do this in a snippet"?
Yes. And I did all that cramming. I mean, I had been
Mhm.
reading all kinds of domestic suspense, sort of identifying my own taste. And what I had to do is I had to make the mistakes first and say what's wrong and
Yeah.
then what's right. And then it did help. I mean, we're going to tiptoe into setting here. It did help that I kind of had that scaffolding of a real place where I had been, where I had not knowing I would write about it, but nonetheless had diary notes, had sketches I'd made. So the place was very real to me, and it was a place I wanted to describe. And then I think we're going to get into why suspense. Part of it was also really tapping into emotions that were authentic to me. So again, the very fictional part of the story is what is the worst thing that could happen to a mother? Having something happen to their child, have their
Mm.
child go missing, not having the answers. And I have a daughter who is the same age as Jules in the story. And so it was not a very big leap for me to imagine how horrible this would be. Also, my daughter is a traveler. She's done a lot of solo traveling. I know you're a
Oh, this
mom
would have
too,
stressed me
Erin.
out so much writing this book. You're
And
amazing.
so then, unlike with my other books where there was maybe years of research, this was there was some research for this book. It was a more turning inward and saying, okay, how do I really feel about this? What would I do next? What would I think? And paying
Mhm.
attention to that.
Well, and that's the thing. It's a wonderful suspense novel, but it's really just such an emotionally grounded like story. There's grief, but there's hope, there's love. Like the can you talk a little bit about the relationship between Rose and her daughter Jules?
Sure. And I can also talk about how it changed through different drafts because
Oh, yeah, I'd love that.
originally I had pictured this as a very close relationship, but one that didn't have a lot of friction.
Hmm.
Because I was thinking, well, I'm very close to my daughter. And so let's just say we have no friction, which perhaps
Yeah.
is not an honest answer. Um, so what ended up happening was that through different drafts, and I had to say, okay, now, the truth is there is some friction, because a lot the story is not only about what happened to her, what, the drowning, working for this charismatic memoirist, but also those deeper questions that I think go beyond the mystery part, which is that what do we really know about our children? What do they know
Mm,
about us? When
hmm.
do we give them more space? What does that text mean? What does it mean when they didn't respond to that text for 3 days? And really trying to write honestly about that.
Yeah. No, I have a daughter who's a little bit younger. She's still in high school, but I'm like, as you're saying that, like my heart is starting, like, because I've gotten those texts where I'll ask these elaborate questions, nah, and you're like, what's behind this? It really, I
Or
mean,
the no text, right? Like, okay,
oh
now what?
yeah. Boy,
Or
that's a
the
brutal one, right?
my children are, I have a daughter and a son. They're not on social media any much lately, but there's still when a child is on social media, what does that picture really mean? What does that caption really mean? Should I ask directly?
Hmm.
Should I not ask? We were talking about this before, Erin, but just before this event, I was filling out some interview questions, and one of them asked me how I was like Rose or not like Rose, and I was saying, well, Rose was very cautious and was, trying to was trying to let her daughter know, was worrying about her traveling, was worrying about her career direction. I'm not like that. I always encourage my daughter. I don't put any limits on this. And then what happened that literally the next day, I found out that my daughter was going on a 50-mile, 3-day solo backpacking trip. And I was like, why?
Just stay home.
Why do you have to do that? Why solo? You have a partner. There's creepy men out there. There's creepy
Yeah.
people out there. But uh, but of course, I also had to send her a message saying, you're going to have a great time. It's
Yeah.
going to be so intense by yourself. You're going to notice everything more. And please let us know when you're okay.
Yeah, right. Please let us
Please
know
let
when you're
us know
back in
when you're out.
civilization. Well, and that's one of the scary tensions about parenting, and that I think you capture so well in the book is this sense of like, we want so badly to like keep our kids close and keep them safe. And yet our job is to send them out into the world and learn to fend for themselves. And it's like, it's terrifying. Like that then combined with the workshop was just so
Yes.
fantastic.
And
And
then
like,
you have some questionable people that are also involved. Yeah.
oh
I
yeah, very
I think all
questionable.
missing person stories are that way. That is really
Yes.
tapping into the feelings we have of the people we love will not always be with us. And in the case of children, it's not because anything bad happens. It's because at some point they
Mhm.
move away, and
Yeah.
and there's that feeling of grief, and then we read a suspense novel and we can kind of experience that grief in a more maybe
Mm.
exaggerated fashion or in a more entertaining story.
Well, and you say exaggerated, and sometimes when I read thrillers, I'm like, the more bananas, the better. Like I'm in. Like I love the crazy, but like I know I'm sure you know about this, but there was a woman in California from California who went missing at this very location while your book would have already been in production. Like it wasn't, so it's not like based on that. But did you read about that, Nancy Ng? It was a yoga retreat, I believe.
Yes, yes. And I looked up the map because strangely enough, it happened exactly where I set this story. And she also went off in a kayak, and there were other people, but she dove off her kayak and went swimming and then was never seen again. And it was strange, because I'd have to imagine what would happen if a person went missing in this lake, this deep lake. And that's why it's called the deepest lake,
Mm.
because bodies go to the bottom and they can't easily be found. And Nancy Ing has not been found. And also finding out, like, well, how would the local authorities cooperate, and what would parents have to do in the crowdfunding sites and all this? How would they mount an effort to try to find this person? And so it has happened in Lake Atitlan, and it's unfortunately a lot like what I describe in my book, which is very difficult to find a person who's drowned there.
Wow, that's just awful. And it reminds me a little bit of this book by Paul Tremblay. I can't, Survivor Song, I think it's called. And it came out like like 2 months or something like that after like COVID hit and shut everything down. And it's about a really fast, like rabies virus that goes in like 24 hours. So everything is shutting down. And it followed it exactly. And I was like, the research, like I was so impressed how much he had gotten right. And we were all living it
Yes.
then. So like we were
Yes.
experts on what was happening. So,
Yes, that's
but
always true.
anyway, I'm sorry. I could talk to you all day. This is
I
delightful.
love
But we have so many good questions. So people were able to send in questions ahead of time to Barnes and
Thank
Noble.
you.
And
Thank you everyone for doing that. So many good questions.
these are great questions, seriously. So I'm going to start with one from Joan. Um, and what I love about this question is so she says, how do you outline? Are you a pantser or planner? Do you write the mystery, the backstory first, and the investigation story second? Like I love that she recognizes the two timelines, that those are kind of different things. But yeah, how did you put this together? Do you plan? Do you not?
So for this book, I did not do any outlining. I just started writing, and this draft came to me very, very quickly. Juliet said, "Can you do it in 2 months?" And I tried, and I did it in four. But then
That's pretty
tons of
good.
years of revisions, years of revisions. For my next book, I actually wrote an outline. I kind of wanted to challenge myself to try that,
Hmm.
just to show that I could, because that's just another act of imagination. If this would happen, then what's the next thing that would happen? But then, as most writers will say, I didn't follow the outline. I mean, it
Yeah.
veered off it quite a bit, but it did help me.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think we have to keep asking ourselves what really did happen, even if the characters in the novel don't yet know what really happened, but we have to be clear
Yeah.
on what happened. That may change as we're writing or as we're revising, but we have to keep asking ourselves that question.
Yes, no, that's such a good question. And I love like the idea too, like the revising ended up being kind of the real work because it does
Years.
change. Like the story is not the story you thought it was going to be. So then that has to be reflected throughout. How
Yes.
do you pace it? This is from Lori. How do you pace yourself while writing a novel? And what does your writing schedule typically look like?
I don't pace myself.
I was like a
Not
cheese it
all.
every sentence. That's how I pace myself.
I like that. I like that. Okay, I probably write when things are going well, 3 to 5 days a week, probably usually a couple hours at a time. Where I fall off pace and get a little bit crazy is during revisions because then I will do
Mm,
these marathon sessions where a couple times per book I will go away to a retreat, whether it's a real retreat like a more formal one, or more
mhm.
often just an Airbnb. And then I will do these marathon sessions of staying up very late and just putting in all the hours and eating crackers and cheese and drinking wine. Or I will send my husband out of the house so that I can do it here and he'll go away for a
Yeah.
couple days. But so at that revision stage, I need as few distractions as possible. I need to have the whole story in my head and I need to spend as many hours as it takes. And so
Mhm.
that's a little that ages us, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like I'm sure, yeah. And yeah, you have to immerse yourself. And also I'm like, we should do one together. So
Then we
who
would
is
talk
your
too much,
favorite?
Aaron.
What's that?
We'd have too much fun and we'd be talking to each other.
It's true. We would need somebody there to be like, separate, ladies. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe we should do a celebratory retreat when we finish drafts. There we go. This is from Rachel. Who is your favorite character in The Deepest Lake and why?
Oh, I think I had a lot of fun writing Eva Marshall,
I
who
was
is
wondering if
the
you would say Eva.
memoirist. Yes, including the backstory of the other books she's written and what she was like as a teenager and what she's like now, and why she is just digging a big hole for herself. So it was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah. Well, and back to the idea of like kind of the larger than life thriller. I would think it would, yeah, I was wondering if it would be Eva. But I also felt when I was reading, like maybe Rose felt the closest.
I
But
started with Rose,
mhm,
but see, also in a lot of ways, Rose is not like me. I mean, she didn't know anything about writing. She was kind of
yeah.
more timid. She wasn't a traveler. So in this case, the main character I would say is probably less like me, except for those
Mm,
motherly feelings, which is really the emotional
yeah.
part of it. But yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, okay. We touched on this with the draft of 4 months, but how long did it take you to finish The Deepest Lake? And how long? Oh, this is from Erin, a delightful name, Erin. How long does it typically take you to finish writing a book? And how much time do you spend on research?
Okay, so I would say normally that first draft, especially for my last few books, is at the short end 4 months, at the long end, maybe nine months, something like
Mhm.
that. So a pregnancy. Um, and then the revision is maybe 1 to 2 years, probably more on the 2 year side. And the research is something I do both before, but also continuing through the process as I know what new questions I have. So that's sort of just a continuous process that sometimes keeps happening after the book is finished because I stay curious and then I keep wanting
Hmm.
to know about a place or a historical period. Yeah, so the research is pretty constant. And I think for maybe more apprentice writers, the trick is turning off that research phase and really getting into the writing.
That was my one of my questions that I was going to add on to Erin's. Is like, how do you not go down the rabbit hole? Like research, I'm like anything to avoid actually writing. I would be like, what can I do? How do you get yourself away from that?
Well, I do enjoy the writing of the story too. I mean, that's what kind of keeps me feeling grounded. So, yeah, so it's more of a distraction temptation, like, oh, let me find out the story of the real people that search lakes and how they do
Mhm.
it, and then just kind of pulling yourself back to get back into the story with the characters. Yeah.
Okay. You sound more disciplined than me. Most people do. I'm not offended at all. Was there a hardest scene or most difficult scene to write in The Deepest Lake? And that's from Abina.
Yeah, that is a really good question.
Mhm.
And when we think hardest, is it sort of plotting wise? I mean, speaking maybe to the writers out there, it was hard in the beginning to get the backstory in without weighing down the whole story.
Mm.
So what has happened before Mother Rose has shown up in Lake Atitlan? So that was hard in that kind of writing sense. Now, in the emotional sense, one of the hardest scenes, but also the most satisfying scene to write was a moment because this is a dual narrative. So we're hearing from Rose, and then we're also hearing from the daughter Jules, but Jules' storyline is what was happening before. So writing a moment where Jules is on the dock next to the lake, and it's her birthday, and she's been out of touch with her mother because of Wi-Fi problems. They can't reach each other. And we know that Rose is wishing, wishing her mother would be in touch. Now, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted because Caitlin in the comments said my favorite scene. Okay, I'll get back to the scene.
I'm with
Um,
you, Caitlin. Yeah.
okay, so the mother is trying not to be a pain in the butt and keep asking her daughter to text more because it's hello, her daughter's birthday.
Mhm.
Rose gave birth to her. But what we know in Jewel's storyline is that it's not her fault. She's not in touch and she's really missing her mother. Oh, I gotta stop.
Oh, yeah, no, that was really, yeah,
Wait, that's
that's a
the scene.
great scene. All right, this one's from
Oh, yeah,
Liz.
you guys made me cry.
What's that?
I just said to the audience, I said, you made me think about that scene. You got me teary.
Oh, you know it's good when you're tearing up. Like you've thought about that scene, you've written that scene, you've revised that scene probably 100 times, and if it can still get you, yeah, readers get ready. Like it's such an emotional book, and it's also such a nail biter. Like it's just such a great book. So Liz wants to know where you get your ideas. You said like earlier that they're not just like one thing. Is it two things coming
Exactly.
together?
I think it's usually two or three things coming
Mhm.
together. And I wish I would have understood that when I was younger, when I had no ideas at all. I spent several years wanting to be a writer, and I was actually more interested in nonfiction, and I could not come up with ideas. And if I had a little bit of an idea, it was too small. And now I realize it really is two or three things coming together, which requires both observing the world and, keeping track of your little ideas and then letting them hybridize or
Yeah,
crossover or whatever.
yeah.
So it might be, oh, here's a great setting. Here's an idea for a mystery. This happened. What's the who done it and the why done it. But for me, I usually get really excited when there's a bigger about. What is the story really about? Not just how did the person die or who did it, but is there some often larger cultural commentary that's going
Mm.
on here? What is this saying about the power of story? What is this saying about how we raise boys today? What is it saying about how mothers and daughters get closer over time? But something that goes beyond just the mystery, and that's when all that comes together. Then I'm ready to write.
Yes, so I want to talk a little bit about the how do we raise boys today. So I wanted to be sure that we talked about this, that you have another book coming out. I just saw the cover on Instagram. It's gorgeous.
Oh,
And
thank you.
if I'm remembering correctly, if the paperback version from Barnes and Noble of The Deepest Lake has the first chapter. Can you
Yes,
talk a
making
little bit about
sponge.
that new
Sure.
project?
Yeah, so there's that sort of exclusive excerpt in the new paperback, and the
God,
next
I love it when it's exclusive. I already got the hardback. I'm buying the paperback because it's exclusive.
so the next book is called What Boys Learn. It comes out in January of 2026, and it's a mother-son story. So Deepest Lake is what is the worst thing that could happen for a mother of a daughter? And unfortunately, is that something happens to your daughter. I actually asked myself the question, and this was different for me, a different way of coming up with the storyline. I said, okay, but what about a son after I was done with Deepest Lake? What would be the worst thing that could happen to the mother of a son? And in this case, it would be worrying that your son had done something. So not so much that he was a victim, but that he was a perpetrator. And so in What Boys Learn, it's a working class single mom living on the North Shore of Chicago, who is worried that her son is involved in the deaths of two schoolmates. And so it's a very different story, but again, tapping into that experience of being a mom of boys and girls.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm all over that book. That sounds so good to me. I just love that. Let's see. Oh, Brittany wants to know, back to the Deepest Lake, how you came up with the title of the book. And I'm curious, did you come up with the title or was that somebody
I
else?
did. I had another title before then, and then I provisionally just labeled the files The Deepest Lake, which is sometimes what happens where you just like, I do believe everyone should just should title your book, even if you know it's going to change. So it
Hmm.
was The Deepest Lake because, well, because it's set on Lake Atitlan, which is really the deepest lake in Central America. And I assumed the title would change, to be honest, but it just stuck. And I didn't get any other suggestions. The publisher didn't have any problems with the title. And so that's what it is.
It's a great title. Like, but I think it's pretty rare that you get to keep your title. A lot of times that'll change at some point in the
Yeah,
marketing.
it's been 50-50 for me, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you said that you think it's a good idea always to title it, even if you think it's going to change. Why
From
do you do that? Why do you think that?
It's a form of committing. It's part of
Mm,
what's giving you signals about what the book is really about. And it's perfectly fine if you keep changing that title, but make
yeah.
that commitment, give yourself that message of this is what it's about. Yeah. And and then you will have many drafts in your computer anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
I'm thinking I'm going to just do like Pulitzer, National Book Award winner.
that's a good
See how far
idea.
that gets me. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Um, let's
Oh,
see.
wait, Erin, I have to tell you, I have a
Yes,
memoir I've been working on for several years, and it's called The Draft That Will Get Finished.
that's a great title. Right now, I'm working on a short story, and the title is called Short Story for Jeff, who is the guy who asked me to write the story. I'm like, okay, great. That's not really giving me a lot of direction. I think I got to change that. I'm gonna do that when we get off the Zoom. Oh, this is such a good question from Tracy. What did you take out of the book that you wish you had included or could have included?
Yes. Okay. So there's a whole group of women that are attending this retreat, and they're all memoirists or want to be memoirists. And so they all come with their stories, either written or not yet written. And so I had come up with pretty elaborate versions of each woman's memoir that she's writing, and they could not all fit in the book. But I had whole scenes where I kind of went into more into their whole story and then had to take that out. So they should be taken out. But to me, they're very real people, and I would love to, read a memoir or see a movie about some of those minor characters.
Do you
So
think that you'll ever include them in something else?
no, they live in this book in this
Mm,
place. Yeah, I don't think so. That's a good
yeah.
question.
But
Yeah.
that's so hard. Like, and I think that's something sometimes people don't understand of like how much writing you have to do around the book to get to the book. It's not just
Yeah.
like maybe you wrote like 40 pages of one of their memoirs or something because you needed this line where like you can inhabit it and understand it and like give that to the reader. But those pages, I'm always like they've served their purpose, right?
Exactly. I think it's the iceberg underneath the surface,
Hmm.
and we only see the top. But for the people to become real to us first as writers, we often have to have more scenes with them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Oh, Allison wanted to know, and I feel like we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but I want to ask it also point blank. Did the story change from the original idea,
It changed a
or how
ton.
did it?
It changed so much in ways I can't completely tell you because it would give away what happens in the story. But
Mhm.
in the end, I ended up writing almost two completely different drafts, where the last third of each book were completely different. So talk about the millions of pages that you write to create one book. Yes, very different stories. And then we had to pick one. So
Yeah. Yeah. Are you happy with the one you picked?
yes,
Yeah.
I think, yeah,
So, right? Yeah. No, we
yeah.
talked about that a little bit earlier, you and I did. And yeah, no spoilers, but I think you did. I think you picked the right one. Um, okay, this is from Gabe. Is there any book out there you wish you wrote? And on the flip side, any book you were about to write that you found had already been written?
Lately, I've been thinking a lot about Dennis Lehane and Shutter Island for some reason. I was having a conversation with a friend about envy and about how we envy other writers or other books. And I was thinking about, well, what's an example of positive envy? What books do I wish I had written? And Shutter Island, which came out a long time ago, it has an unreliable narrator. It has a huge twist. It has an incredible atmosphere, and it also has some history in it. And I like all that. As far as getting scooped, I have gotten scooped on books, so I
Mm,
can't tell you which one happened lately. But when that happens, I tell myself, okay, just step away from it and let a couple years pass. And you still might come back to that because you'll write it differently than the other person wrote it. But yeah, that
yeah.
does happen.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time I have a book that's about to come out, I read a book and I think, oh my God, it's the same book. And it's not, but I am so convinced that I have just like, oh my God, I somehow have written the entire book the same. And there's like one scene that's similar. But I'm so paranoid at that point. And I wrote down Shutter Island. That's one of the few by Dennis Lehane I haven't read yet. But yeah, I just read, oh, what was it? Mercy? Is that it? Just Mercy? I can't even remember the name of it. But like it's one of his more recent. There's a kid on the cover and a horse. That's all I can tell you. But it was really good. So shout out to Dennis Lehane's book with the kid and the horse. All right. Do you let's see, let's see. Oh, we already answered that one about a writing routine. Before you were able to write full time, how did you find time to write? And do you
Well,
write full time?
I started writing when my kids were very small, babies, basically. And
Mm,
that was the best lesson I could have ever had. I was a journalist, freelance journalist, and travel writer at the time. And what having young kids taught me was that, you can't wait, you can't procrastinate, you can't distract yourself when the baby falls asleep for the nap. That is the 20 or 40 minutes that you get, or we would call it the double header. The baby wakes up, turns over, oh, I get another 40 minutes, but I'm not going to waste a single one. So it taught me to write in shorter time periods. It
mhm,
also taught me to not be so precious that, whatever draft I could finish at the time. I was actually writing essays, but so if I wrote an essay in one day and there was a contest and the deadline was midnight, off it went into the mail. And then anyway, my kids were still small by the time I switched over to fiction, but I just threw myself at it because when you have young kids, you're kind of desperate. You're desperate to be creative, you're desperate to express yourself, and perfection is impossible.
Yeah, no, yeah, that I love that we have this question. So we had it in conjunction with the idea of like going to the retreat and going to the Airbnb for a week and really immersing yourself in the story. I'm glad we got to like a nuts and bolts also version of that, that you can't be precious. You can't
Yeah.
like those blocks of time that you when you get them as a writer are really special, but they're also really rare. So I like hearing how you fit it in the
Yeah,
crevices
and
during
those
the
those
real
bigger
day.
ret the bigger retreat blocks, like I said, that can be kind of less healthy. That's the kind of running a
Yeah.
marathon that's going to exhaust you. Even now, so I live on a small, beautiful island off the west coast of Canada, and we take ferries all the time. And there's often a long line for the ferry, and then the ferry itself takes 20 minutes. And I frequently will do some writing with my laptop, waiting for the
Mm.
ferry or the 20 minutes on the ferry. I will do that, and those little pieces add up.
Well, yeah, that's great. Um, that sounds so peaceful and so
It
wonderful.
is.
Yeah, I love it. This is from Praz. How do you decide if an idea is good enough to be turned into a novel?
If it won't leave me alone, that's
Mm,
absolutely it. So, I think when I was younger, I tried to jump in and start writing even sooner. Now I realize it's like put it in my head, keep thinking about it, keep looking for those other things to add to it. And if it's something I really need to write, it's not going to leave me alone. I'm going to, start playing the scenes in my head like you're watching a movie, or I'm
Mhm.
going to be falling asleep and trying to solve a problem or think about it. So yeah, so whatever won't leave you, whether it's, the premise itself or a particular scene or an ethical question or something.
Yeah. Are you working on something now? I know you've got the novel coming out and that one's still in process, but have you started another one?
So I'm always working on multiple projects at a time
Hmm.
because as a writer, you have all these long waiting periods. You send something off to an agent and you wait a really long time for them to read it, send it to an editor. There's the many different rounds of editing. So then there will be these pockets of 1 month to 4 months. And so I'm always working on, the older I get, the more things I'm stacking and working on at a
Mm.
time. And in this case, I'm working on both fiction and nonfiction. And I get my inspiration about this sort of a process from screenwriters even more than novelists. Because again, talk about people who are not precious. They know that they have to have a ton of ideas and they have to be working on lots of different things. And very rarely will those things actually get made, get greenlit, actually get
Mm.
to the audience. But nonetheless, they have to just keep working on all the stories that are fascinating them and kind of juggling them. So I really
Yeah.
like doing that. I enjoy doing that. And then when I have to set something aside because now something has come back from the editor, that's really good because that allows this project over here to cool off a little bit. And then when I come back to it, I'm going to have new ideas for it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. There two things. Like it reminds me of there's that SNL. I'm so good with the details. That SNL 50th like four-part docu-series on some streaming. And the third one is about the writer's room. And it is
Ooh.
like it is really interesting how watching them have to like pump out these ideas like in the course of a week, how everything happens so fast. They're up so it's really interesting to like learn about the writing process. The other thing is I read Shonda Rhimes's like a memoir by her. Can I remember the name? Of course not.
Something about
But
saying yes or something.
yes, it's yes was in the
The
title.
year
I
of
was like,
saying
well,
yes.
was it?
The year of saying yes, maybe. I read it
That
too.
could be. I got closer than I did with the Dennis Lehane with the horse and the kid. So I'll take it. Yes, is in the title. But she talks about writing for TV every week. And she's like, it's laying tracks. Every week I'm laying tracks as the train comes down. And I've always thought about that, like the pressure that would be. At least I feel like as a novelist or fiction writer, we do get it. It's not quite as intense for the most part. But yeah, both of those were super interesting to me.
Okay, so Erin, I have to tell you that years ago, I was actually in a writer's room for 6 months in Alaska, and it was called the
Ooh.
Pilot Project, and it was five writers in a room working full time, being paid to work full time to churn out five TV series. We wrote the pilots, and then we wrote sample episodes, and then all the material that goes with that. None of these shows were ever made, but we spent 6 months
Oh my gosh.
and it was so fun. It was
Was
so
it?
fun. Oh, it was fantastic. Number one, working with other writers. Number
Mm.
two, proving to yourself, oh, okay, I can write anything. I can write the small town lawyer movie. I can write the missing persons mystery. I can write the comedy set up at comedy set in a national park with stand-up comics. I can do the space one where the aliens come out of the ice. I'm getting this is getting too specific, but literally we
Excellent.
wrote five different shows and then we went to Hollywood and pitched them, and that was really fun. Again, none of these got made, but it was a fantastic way to experiment with writing and writing in a team.
Well, do you want to know why they didn't get made? Because
Why?
you called it the pilot project. You should have called it the series that's going to run for 10 years, right?
I think
You've
you're
got to
right.
have the vision in the title. No, that would be so interesting. And I love the idea too of collaboration. I think too often people think writers like to be alone, which we certainly do, but I love collaborating. Like you've talked about with your editor. I think that's such a fun experience to have somebody else in the room. Like I'm always like, I want to be the dumbest person working on this book, right? Like I want other people helping me. Like I'll get as far as I can, but it's not going to be far enough. Like
That's great. And my editors have absolutely helped me, even whether it's with specific ideas and answers or just the right question. where you kind of go,
Hmm.
oh, that's the right question to ask. Okay, let me go fix this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as soon as it's asked, you're like, how did I not see that? How did I not know? But yeah, a great editor is a thing to behold. Um, let's see. Leanna wants to know, what is your interesting writing quirk? I hope it's weird. I hope it's super
It's
weird.
oh, it may not be weird enough. Okay, so this is a mug. I get really fixated on mugs and other
Mm.
dishes, but especially mugs, and I tend to buy a new mug for each writing project, each novel, and then I associate the novel. So this is the What Boys Learn. That's my next one. Um,
Uh-huh.
so then I will drink out of that mug when I'm working on that project. But it also means that then the mug becomes endowed with all the feelings of that project. And so, like this is kind of hard now because this involved a lot of revisions. It was a little tiring. So then I have to go get another mug. But anyway, so I match the mugs to the writing project.
Oh, that's so great. I'm always looking for an excuse to buy another water bottle because I've only got like 60 of them. And so I'm like, maybe I should start doing that. I'll tie them to a project, but I'm going to do it by chapter because then I can get like 50 new water bottles in the course of one book. Okay, you're gonna see that was quirky enough. Um, when did your love for reading begin? I love that question from Gina because first of all, it just supposes that you love reading, which is something
I hope I
every
do.
every writer I know loves reading. So yeah, when did
So
that start?
I don't remember when I started reading, but boy, do I remember going to the bookmobile. And I don't know if everyone has bookmobiles, but it came to our neighborhood
Hmm.
and it was many blocks away. But my sisters and I, we kind of had a feral childhood where our mother was not around very often. And you'd head off to the bookmobile and check out as many books as they would let you. Um, and I love that. I mean, whether it was books about sharks or, or cute picture books or whatever. But I also remember the first time I tried writing a story. Um,
Mm.
I when I finished it, I brought it to the librarian and gave it to her to read, and she did, and that was very special.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yay,
Did she,
librarians!
was it a good workshop with the librarian? Did she have positive feedback? I hope she didn't scare you.
Well, then it started.
No, that's I think there really is something like there's the reading, there's the writing, there is also like that joy of writing when you first start doing it, but there's also like there's this the first audience. The first person that ever
Yes.
reads your stuff is
Yes,
really
and all they have to say is, I want to see more or great. I mean, they don't have to say much.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a very special experience. Yay, libraries. We need our libraries.
Oh, that's great. So I just got a message from Zoom that says it sounds like you might have switched to a different language. And I think it's because my voice went high and I like to speak in voices. So nope, still English. What do you do if you have writer's block? This is from Marcia.
So I don't fully believe in writer's block.
Mm,
I'm one of those people who believes in just showing up. And I mean, showing up is hard. There's
yeah.
resistance. But I think it's by doing the writing that you actually get out of the stuck place. So not waiting till you're sure that you have the idea or that everything's working, just trying to put in the time, even if it's a very short period of time, and getting past that. And then if that doesn't work, I still talked about before about having multiple projects because you can always set something aside. I
Hmm.
remember in early drafts of What Boys Learn, I had a completely different storyline for that book. And then I set it aside to work on something else. And then one time I'm on a plane airplane and I'm sitting there and all of a sudden a completely new plot line that would solve my problems came to me just I think because I was trapped and I wasn't on social media and nobody was talking to
Hmm.
me and then I just started making notes. So
Oh,
again,
wow.
so the two things, the sit in the chair, get the work done,
Mhm.
and then the other part is, give it some time, let it cool off, go to another project.
Yeah, no, I love that idea of um, you have to just there's no way through writer's block other than through. Like
Then through.
it's not gonna fix itself. I can't remember, shocker, who said it, but there's a saying, there's no such thing as writer's block if your standards are low enough. And I think that's really true, right? Like as long as you're
That's
going
a
to
better
sit
answer.
down and write crap, like you can
Yes,
make it.
yes, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, and you
let,
really are just giving yourself, you're putting, I'm so good to answer that question too. You're putting clay on the table. You will
mhm,
shape it later, or you're laying bricks or whatever. Bricks are, I
yeah.
guess, harder to move later than the clay. So let's stick with the clay metaphor. But yeah,
Yeah.
just get the clay on there because later you're going to have fun with revising it. You can change it all around later.
Yeah, I was just listening to that 100 Words of Summer by Jamie Attenberg, and one of the essays in there talks about it not even just as the clay, but the first step is making the clay. And I'm like, yeah, like it's all part of it. Okay, so this is our last question. This is from Jessica. What is the best advice you have ever received? She doesn't specifically say about writing, but I'm assuming so. But maybe
Mm.
maybe we'll do both.
Oh, best advice. Okay, there's so much. I'm going to read the epigraph from The Deepest Lake because you
Oh,
commented on this
yeah.
epigraph. So this is some really good advice. It's by Anne Lamott. You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better.
That's such an ominous piece of advice, and such a good one, such a good epigraph for this novel. So thank you so much for Andromeda for being here today, and to all of our viewers for tuning in, listening to us gab, and to the writers who wrote in their questions. These were wonderful. And so The Deepest Lake is available. Like I said, it is the mystery thriller monthly pick for May at Barnes and Noble. So you can run down and get that in the store. And if you're like me and have no patience, you can just click that button on barnesandnoble.com right now. So thank you, Andromeda. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone in the audience. Thank you, Barnes& and Noble. It's been so fun.